And this story comes from the Jewish tradition. And it's from long, long ago. And it's about this king who seemed to have everything he wanted. He had a beautiful home, a beautiful castle. His followers loved him. And he had this beautiful, diamond that was just perfect. And he was kind of obsessed by this diamond, and he'd often just stare and look at this diamond. And he just became obsessed. But then one day when he was looking at it, he noticed there was a crack developing in the diamond. And he thought, no, my perfect diamond, what's happening to it? So he thought, he put out, so he brought in all these people who could repair it, and they were looking at the diamond and they're saying, I don't think I can repair it, because if I try and rub out the crack, it might break, and then the whole diamond would shatter. So he kept bringing in the best repairers in this land, and none of them thought they could repair it. And then eventually this person came in, this wise old repairer looked at it and said, I think I can fix it. The king said, really? He said, but there needs to be one condition. I need to take it away for 2 weeks, and you cannot come and see how I'm doing. You have to wait till I've completely fixed it. And the king kind of thought about that. He said, can I trust this person to do it? Why does he need all this time? But the diamond, he had this flaw in it, a seeming flaw, and he thought, well, I may as well try. So he said, okay, take it. So the repairer took the diamond away, and he worked really hard, really diligently, and he thought he could fix it, but he wasn't sure, and then he realized, yes, I can. So he brought it back, and he had it in this velvet bag, and he unveiled it to the king and showed him it. And the king gasped, because the diamond was even more beautiful than before, because the repairer had not actually eliminated the flaw, but had used it as a stem and added a beautiful rose to the diamond. So he made it even more beautiful. And I think sometimes that happens. Sometimes we have a problem. Sometimes we have something that's hard. Sometimes we maybe injure ourselves, and we can actually learn that, things can be better. We can repair things. It may not be exactly the same. And we're talking about scars today, and I've got this cut here. I actually cut my hand in a washing machine. Do you believe it or not? Yeah, I was surprised by that too. And I've got, and I've got a scar here. You've got scars too. Yeah, but when you think of scars, you realize that was something that was broken that can now be healed. So thank you so much for listening. It's time for your religious education classes now. I invite you now to join me in a spirit of prayer, meditation, and reflection. These are the words of Reverend Anne Barker. We gather with a hunger for healing. What is done cannot be undone. What is done next must be done with care. We gather because we are hopeful, because we have visions and dream of a brighter future. There may be more than simply vision in this room. These are the wounds we must heal together. Grief and anger for all that has been lost. Guilt or fear in the reliving. Pain that has gone on without sufficient comfort. Mistrust that was earned that continues burning still. Every injury we may have named and yet still carry, those we haven't, can't, or dare not speak aloud, those we are not ready to make public. those still not recognized, accepted, understood. These are the wounds that seek replacement, not cancellation or denial. Wounds we tend cautiously, applying the salve of understanding, forming scars that mark our history, without disfiguring the future we might share. This is not a time for quick solutions, fancy talking. This is a slow precision. This is a prayer for peace. We are new at this endeavor, new at listening, new at hearing, new at taking enough time to honestly receive one another's stories. What is done cannot be undone. What is done next must now be done with great care. We gather because we are hopeful, because we have visions and dreams of a brighter future. May the strength of this time together help us to walk forward. May the wisdom of this experience help us to know our path. May we have the courage to return as often as necessary until our way is clear. May we have the perseverance together to see it through. May we cause it to be so. I invite you to join me in a time of silence.
When my day began on April 2nd, 2016, I had no idea what was in store for me. What I did know is that my husband at the time was struggling and seemed preoccupied and distant much of the time. But I had many notions about why that was. We had shut down our community theater company, and that was very difficult. He was frustrated about his health issues, and his job was incredibly stressful and very demanding. I also knew that he was unsure about our future together. I, however, was not. We had weathered difficult times previously, and I was sure that we would pull through now as we had before. But then, that day, he asked me for a divorce. I was not prepared. In the hours, days, and weeks following that, I came to understand how much pain he had been in. He had not been honest with me. He had not been communicating his authentic inner world with me. He had been on the fence about our marriage for at least 8 years, if not longer. I had no idea this distress and discomfort had been at that level for so long. I was devastated. I was heartbroken. There aren't many words to communicate the pain I was feeling. However, as time passed after that horrible day, I started to see things a little differently. I realized that our relationship had been unhealthy and much more unhealthy than I had originally thought. He had been hiding parts of himself from me for many years. Unfortunately, he felt ashamed and unsafe with me and did not feel he could fully show up as himself in our marriage. And me, well, I had gotten into this relationship before I really knew how to be an adult in the world. We had started dating when I was 19. I mean, even though I was an old 19, I was still nowhere fully mature. I basically went from living with my mom to living with my fiancé, then husband, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally too. When we had first become a couple, neither one of us had possessed the tools needed to forge a healthy relationship out of the baggage and trauma of our childhoods. We'd each shown up in our marriage in ways that mirrored the family dynamic that we came from. We had continued to use the strategies and behaviors we had used to survive in our families of origin. And I will be very honest with you, that divorce was incredibly difficult for me. The tone between the two of us sadly turned negative, and it got really tough. Those 2 years encompassed some of the most trying times of my life. However, having said all that, I can authentically say to you today that I am so glad that my ex asked me for a divorce. My goodness, I am so thankful. To be clear, I am not thankful how he handled it or how he behaved during that time, but he gave me an incredible gift that day. He set me free from a relationship that I didn't even realize was toxic for both of us and infantilizing for me. He opened the door for me to be able to meet my true, authentic self for the first time in my life. You see, I had believed so much of what he had told me over the years. You're too sensitive, you're too emotional, you're too much. I had already internalized these messages as a child, and as his partner, it solidified them more into my being. I had spent our 22 years together believing I was broken. After we parted ways, I began to see that my sensitivity isn't my weakness. It is my superpower. In my job as a psychotherapist, I use this sensitivity every day to help people by tuning into them. It is one of my special gifts as a human being, but I could never see it that way until I was single again. My friends and family were so incredibly supportive at this time. They were the reason I was able to heal in the way that I did. I constantly had friends taking me on exciting adventures, getting together with me and my kids, or just being there for text messages or for a phone call. My community showed up for me in such an amazing way over and over again. And throughout this process, they were showing me and reminding me who I really was. When I continuously witnessed them showing me so much love and support, it made it easier for me to believe that I was lovable, which I hadn't truly believed in my life up until that point. With the help of my family and friends and their love and support, I got the opportunity to meet adult Blythe for the first time and to really get to know her on my own terms. And it was amazing. She is amazing. My time as a divorcee showed me that my scars from this whole experience were deep and intense, sure, but also wonderfully helpful. They showed me what not to do, what choices to avoid. They reminded me of the paths I didn't ever want to walk again. I finally got myself to a point where I could accept myself with all my flaws, and I could be really ready to welcome a new partner who would hopefully also be accepting of who I am. And most importantly, I was able to truly embody a love it or leave it attitude. The spirit of this is, I love me, and if you can't, well, it's your loss. I showed up to a first date on November 10th, 2019, where I met a man named Hanju Kim, who is now my wonderful, amazing, very loving, and very accepting husband. I showed up that night with some pretty deep and profound scars. Sure, they might have been a little daunting to another potential partner, but I'd like to think they also added to the beauty and complexity of who I was and who I am today. I wear them with pride, and I encourage everyone else to wear your scars with pride also.
I want you to invite you to think, have you ever thought about the difference between your wounds and your scars? Why are scars so important, and why are they different from our wounds? We get physical scars from accidents and injuries. And in the healing process, Sometimes they can disappear and be a very minor blemish in our skin. Other times they can be quite profound scars that maybe have a big psychological impact on us, and maybe become always very self-conscious of them. But like Blythe talked about quite beautifully, I think we need to be thankful for our scars because they're proof that our bodies can heal. They're proof our bodies can heal. And of course, with any injuries or any illness or things, there's of course the physical recovery, the physical scars, but there's also the emotional and spiritual recovery, which maybe we don't always treat quite as well. Think about how we treat physical cuts. We clean it. We stop the bleeding. We clean it again. We bandage it up. We probably put disinfectant on it. We protect it to allow healing. And then we end up with perhaps a clean scar or a minor blemish. That's all the physical work we do. What about the emotional and spiritual work that's often associated with that? And there's also another step we do with young children. Whenever we put a Band-Aid on it, we'd often kiss it as a demonstration of love and care. I don't know about you, I don't do that with adults. That would probably not end well. But why not? Why don't we show that same act of love and care when we put a Band-Aid on others, when we help others? Because it's a beautiful act of love and care. And often a child will not leave with a Band-Aid until the guardian, the parent, the family member, the friend has imparted a kiss on the boo-boo. So I also want to think of that metaphor of the physical scars as we talk about the spiritual and emotional scars that we all carry. Or perhaps it's better to say we all carry these spiritual, emotional wounds. The thing about a wound is it can still get infected, it can still bleed, it can still open up. Scars are a sign that the physical wound has healed. And I think so often we spend so much time looking at our physical wounds and healing them, we don't do the spiritual and emotional healing that many of us need from those events. David Miss Pelly, an author, says, you need to be grateful for the hardships, the obstacles, the failures. Why? Because these are the points of wisdom in your life. They give you strength, they teach you how to persevere and form your resilience. They teach you how to persevere and form your resilience. And one of the things about resilience is when we recover, we don't always go back to the same place we were before. Like the story for Time for All Ages, that flaw became a beautiful rose. It was never going to go back to how it was before. But with resilience, we may not go back to how we were before, but we can go back stronger than we were before. And sometimes the most difficult gifts to be grateful for are those gifts that cause us suffering and loss. I have found those gifts in my own life, even in times when things I wish had never happened. In September 2001, Natalie and I came back from our pre-wedding honeymoon to find out that, like many honeymoons, we had become pregnant during them. It was a little awkward with a pre-wedding honeymoon, but we were adults. So we were really excited. We had a wedding in November, just 2 or 3 months away. We were pregnant with a new child, a new baby, and we were really excited about it. And we did not wait till the first trimester was over. We shared it with our friends because we were happy and we were telling them all about it. Well, we went to a doctor's appointment And we did the ultrasound, and the doctor looked very concerned. There's no heartbeat. Natalie and I just went from elation and plummeted. So we talked about next steps. Was there any options? And said, well, you can think about it for a few days, but we think you should need to get a D&C because the pregnancy's not viable. So we left. We took a couple of days to think about it. And then Natalie says, no, my body, it's different. I know, it's not. So we went through the whole process of the D&C together. And then we're trying to get ourselves up for the wedding to come in a couple of months' time. And it's probably good we had that, but it's focused. But then we had to share with our friends who had celebrated with us the pregnancy and share with them. And that's where the gift came in. Because they helped us through that. We could tell a story about it. We could see our own pain reflected in their eyes. And that was a holy communion, to see our own grief reflected in others' eyes. We centered ourselves in that mutual love we had for them and they had for us. And that held us at a time that we badly needed held. And then we started moving forward to planning the wedding. But in time, found out one of our friends who we were very close to told his mother back in Ireland about it. And she shared for the first time with him, I had 3 miscarriages, and I never shared it with anyone. Only one of them with my husband, your father. Natalie's best friend had 2 miscarriages and had never told anyone, and said to us, you are so lucky you talked about this because we can share it. I did all this on my own. That's what we were grateful for, that it opened up this conversation that was too many secrets about something that so many women go through, often on their own or often as a couple. And I truly value that because it opened up a conversation amongst our friends and their family that may never have happened otherwise. And I suspect there's many in this room who've had a similar experience, perhaps with family, perhaps with yourself. Vulnerability is said to be where our courage meets our deepest fear. We were certainly vulnerable at the time, and we certainly had one of our worst fears realized, but the courage we experienced came from our friends and family. It did not come from us. And I think I heard the same thing with Blythe and her story of a divorce, that her courage came from her friends who supported her, who replied to texts. Religious communities such as this one are places that we can care for the spiritual and emotional wounds of people. We all bring them. Because most people come to religious community because they are struggling with something. They might be struggling with loneliness. They might be struggling with a change in a personal situation. They might be struggling with a personal dynamic. They might just be struggling with finding that heart-shaped hole missing in their life that can be filled by religion. We are a place that we can care for the spiritual and emotional wounds by having support groups that we have, like the caregiver support group, by having the writing groups where we can write about our experiences that maybe we can't share to others. Religious community is about coming to a place where we can share those deep, deep parts of ourselves. Parts that we wouldn't just share with everyone. We might not even share with our friends, but this is a community where we can bring those difficult topics, those difficult conversations, and find a caring presence, a listening ear, the helping hands, and above all, that loving heart It'll do that spiritual kiss as an act of love as we work through the spiritual and emotional pain that we're carrying. Joseph Campbell says, mythology tells us that where you stumble, there your treasure is. Where it seems most challenging lies the greatest invitation to find deeper and greater power in ourselves. Where we stumble lies the greatest invitation to find deeper and greater power in ourselves. But how do we address those spiritual and emotional wounds? How do we help turn those spiritual and emotional wounds into scars? Scars don't disappear. They become a part of us. But they won't get infected. They might be tender to the touch. They might be tender when stretched, but they will not be infected. Wounds will be. So part of the role of religious community is turning those spiritual and emotional wounds into scars. And we do that by listening. We do that by telling our stories to one another. We do that by having people that will care for us and hold us in those most tender times in our lives. Because suffering ultimately is a wound to our spirit. There's no inherent meaning in suffering. When I worked as a chaplain in the hospital, some people say, well, God's doing this, God's punishing me. No, there's no inherent meaning in suffering. We can find meaning in suffering, but there's no inherent meaning. And a God who punishes you in that way is not a God that's not worth worshipping. And I want to talk about the difference between curing and healing here, because ultimately what religious community is about is healing and not about curing, because they're not the same thing. Curing can end physical symptoms, illnesses, or injuries, correct malfunctions of the body. Healing is a process we go through. It's physical, emotional, and spiritual repair. Repair of our psyche, repair of our emotions, repair of our spiritual outlook. And some healing is possible even when giving up for the hope of a cure. And there's a story from Christopher Boyce, a colleague of ours, who shares this. The story's called The Cure, and it's about a young girl called Maggie. And she's desperately ill. And they're not sure that they will ever find a cure for it. And then 3 people come by. And Maggie at this point has been pretty isolated. Her friends had been coming regularly, but they've stopped coming. Her parents still come, but at their wits' end and emotionally exhausted. And the 3 people are a doctor, a minister, and a magician. And the 3 people say, we are going to find a cure to this. And the doctor says, I'm going to go and research your illness, and I'll be back in a week, and I really believe I'll have a cure. And the minister said, I'll go and pray for you for a week, and hopefully between my prayers will be heard by the Spirit of life and love, and that will cure you. And the magician said, I am going to conjure up these spells, which I hope Gaia, the divine universe, the divine consciousness, will cure you. They came back in a week, and they were all heartbroken because they could not find a cure. And they said to Maggie, he said, I'm so sorry, we tried our best, but we could not find the cure for you. And Maggie said, hold my hand. So the 3 of them came, and they held their hands. And Maggie says, the medicine I need is your friendship. The prayer I need right now is your company. And the magic I need right now is your love. The medicine I need is your friendship. The prayer I need is your company. And the magic I need is your love. Religious community can provide all of these three things. They cannot provide a cure, but we can provide each of those: the company, the love, the friendship. And that can help transform wounds into scars that arouse us to live on, not the same as we'll be before, perhaps not even cured, but knowing we're cared for. Notice people are present with us who love us. And that there is healing. So we have to be grateful for our scars and recognizing our own strength and capacity of resilience, growth, and our own ability to overcome our challenges. Our scars reflect our ability to overcome that, be they emotional, be they physical. And recognizing and being grateful for our scars, and acknowledging we have done the sacred work of healing, of converting our wounds to scars. Let us all be grateful for the many scars we all carry in life.